Good morning, everyone. Just testing the sound first. Good morning, everyone. All right. So usually prisoners are very what do you say? How do you say that? Like on time. Help me out with words. Number one, it's too early. Number two, my coffee hasn't kicked in yet. And then number three, of course, I'm a little bit nervous. So bear with me, but we will get through this. So he's due to call in a couple of minutes. Like I said, usually they're on time. So I'll just go through punctual. Thank you, Lisa. Yes, that's the word. Usually, yeah, they're punctual. So I won't be reading the chat because I'll be focused on the questions that I have here. I've printed out all of them and I've tried to organize them based on the themes, I guess. So we'll talk about before the crime, what his upbringing was like, and then we'll talk a little bit about the crime. And from my understanding, he's trying to actually appeal the case, so I'm not sure what's going on there. I'm sure he'll tell us. And then also life in prison, and then we'll ask him about CW. And then he had a pretty crazy trial from what I understand. Apparently his defense lawyer was in a relationship with his mother during the trial, which, I don't know, it sounds very unethical at least. So I don't know how that might impact his appeal and if he will be talking about that. I thought that was really interesting. Another thing is that since he has been incarcerated, through his journey, he has also found religion, and I think he's a Muslim, and he refers to himself by a different name. So his name is Malik. I'm pretty sure that's what he will be referring himself to as. Sorry. Lexi, yes, from my experience, he is very honest and straightforward. Allie wants to know how long he's been in prison. I'm pretty sure since 1995. Let me just double check that. Oh no, he was arrested August 15th, 1991. Dang. That's a long time. And I was under the impression that he is not eligible for parole, but he did tell me that, let me see here. He says, I was ultimately found guilty of both charges, sentenced to life plus 10 years with a parole eligibility date in 2029. I'm currently in my 29th year of that sentence. Wow. Stephanie is asking, why do I think he may be switched to another pod? They have these annual review meetings of, I guess, like how they're doing and if they're improving, and whatever the criteria are that they were looking at. and sometimes they do get moved around based on their conduct and their behavior. So I think because this is a super max, I think that he's hoping to either be moved to a regular maximum security or anything that's less restrictive, because here I think he is locked up like 23 hours a day. No, he's not in the same prison as Stephen Avery. He's at a, it's called Wisconsin Secure Program Facility. It's uh, it's like in West Wisconsin in a town called Boscobel. Let me see if I can pull something up. WSPF. There's actually a video on YouTube that shows recording of someone getting taken out of his cell. There have been a lot of lawsuits in this particular facility because of claims of inhumane treatment and stuff like that. Yeah, I know, 23 hours a day. Lexi Taylor, why a max prison when others have done more heinous things? That's a good question. Like I said, they have certain criteria that they go off of in terms of assigning them to the security levels that they feel are appropriate. Considering he's been locked up for almost 30 years, I don't know why he would still be in a maximum security unless they consider him dangerous. And that's one thing that we can also ask him, which I'm going to write down, because by now I feel like he should be a lower risk after that long. I'm writing that down. I will add that question, Ali, whether or not he's ever been in trouble in prison. I'm sure he has. I don't see how it would be possible to go 30 years without getting in trouble. Shelby Wright wants to know how old he was when he was incarcerated. I believe he was like 18. I'm sure he'll give us a quick background. And we have 3 calls, and each call is 15 minutes. So what do you guys think about doing the first call maybe on just some background, and then the second call about the crime, and then the last call about his life in prison? Or should we just kind of go with the flow? I don't like setting limits too much because can take away from the natural flow of the conversation. So okay, go with the flow. Okay. Sounds good. I wonder if he's nervous. He's emailed me and he says he's very excited and he is grateful that we want to even like listen to him or hear his story. I guess that's one of the things that he was saying, is that no one really wants to listen to what they have to say, which on the one hand I think is understandable, because I feel like there's this reputation of, once a criminal, always a criminal. But in my experience, at least, I don't think that's always the case. For the most part, yeah, but not always. Top question. There are so many good questions. I know for a fact that I want to get his thoughts on CW, so we'll have to squeeze that in. Queen Moomin has been watching Don't F with Cats on Netflix and paused it to watch this, and she worries about her mental health. Join the club. All right, here we go. Let me know if you guys hear him.
Hello, you have a prepaid call from Malik, an inmate at Wisconsin Secure Program Facility.
Can you hear that?
Your account balance is 32. All calls other than properly placed attorney calls may be monitored and recorded. Thank you for using IC Solutions. You may begin speaking now. Hello?
Good morning.
Good morning, Natasha. How you doing?
I'm doing fine. How are you?
I'm doing good.
All right. Well, just to let you know, we're already live, so everyone's waiting and listening. Okay. So we'll just dive right in since we have a limited amount of time. So let's start with, is there anything that you wanted to just tell us as kind of like an intro or an opening, just a little bit about yourself? And yeah, so.
Yes. Good morning, everyone. Peace and blessings to all those who are listening. My name is Toussaint L. Harley. I commonly go by the Muslim name Malik Toussaint. I'm currently serving a life plus 10-year sentence with a parole eligibility date of 2029. This is my 29th year of incarceration. I was charged with first-degree intentional homicide and first-degree reckless injury for the most unfortunate death of a young man by the name of Christopher Salas and the injuring of his friend, Aaron Evans, in 1991 at the Bradford Beach in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. Unfortunately, I'm serving time for his murder, even though I was not the person responsible for his murder. I firmly believe that the only reason I was given so much time is the fact that I wouldn't tell on the person who actually committed the murder. Through the police and the DA's office, they know who he is and they know his role in the shooting incident. I'm not one to say that I shouldn't have been sent to prison, I do acknowledge that I deserve some prison time, but not a life sentence. I was born and raised in the poverty-stricken areas of Milwaukee, Wisconsin, on the east side of Milwaukee and the northwest side of Milwaukee. Um, that's where my family still resides today in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. And so with that, if there's any questions that anyone has, I'm open to answering their questions.
Yes. So, well, I think you started off by telling us a little bit about where you're from. So can you tell us a little bit about your childhood and if you have any siblings and your relationship with them and your parents? Just a little bit of background information about your upbringing.
Okay. I have two sisters, one older, one younger. I was raised in a single family home by my mother. Her and my father divorced when I was about 2 years old. Since that time, he really hasn't been in my life too much. Growing up, he came around periodically, but was not a role model per se in my life. My mother, she grew up having undiagnosed mental illness, drug and alcohol problems, but she did her best to raise me and my siblings by herself, but also with assistance from family members. I was in foster care twice in my early age, my adolescent years, which were very helpful, very positive environments, and helped my mother greatly be able to get herself situated and be able to take care of us in a proper manner. I grew up not necessarily exposed to as much violence as you see in the streets nowadays, but I was exposed to violence at a very young age that ultimately ended up altering and shaping my inner self and life experiences. I was 3 or 4 years old when I witnessed my first homicide. A young person had his brains blown out right in front of me.
Wow.
And after that, I witnessed my friend get his head crushed by a semi-truck. And so every year thereafter, I was witnessing different acts of violence, or very, very brutal acts of violence, or some form of death, and not knowing how to express what I was feeling in relation to those acts. I think the initial act of violence that I experienced really encaged me emotionally and prevented me from being outspoken related to my emotions. I just simply didn't know how to convey what I had witnessed at that age. I knew something serious had occurred. I didn't understand death at 3 or 4 years old, of course, but I knew something very, very serious had occurred. And I just simply didn't know how to express the impact of it, or the impact of my friend being accidentally killed in front of me, or the deaths of other people. And that really was the onset of my mental illness that was undiagnosed for many, many years. I didn't even know what mental illness was until maybe 10 years ago.
Okay.
And so that's a portion of my upbringing. But now let me say this too: my upbringing was not simply all traumatic and all negative and things of that nature. It was the environment I grew up in back then was as ironic as it may sound, was very loving. The ghettos that I was raised in was a family-oriented, family-structured environment where neighbors looked out for each other and things of that nature. So I don't want to give the impression that it was just simply all negative, because that would be factually incorrect. It was very, very good in many respects. It just had its very powerful and potent negative aspects as well.
Right. Definitely. And I've seen that a lot in my work today, and in the past too, where what a lot of people may refer to as the ghetto or whatever. I feel like, and even with gangs too, I feel like that's kind of like a family in itself, because a lot of times a lot of kids do grow up in a single parent household, and there is, you know, drug and alcohol issues going on. And so I feel like there's like this natural pull towards a group of people that you can trust and feel protected by.
Almost definitely. I became a member of a gang at a very young age, not necessarily to engage in criminal activity. It was more so just a group of friends, you know, who were calling themselves something. And so we didn't, you know, we wasn't just ravaging our neighborhood and causing all type of chaos. You know, we were a group of friends who, you know, participated in sports and, you know, had fun as young kids. As we grew older, we then began to engage in criminal activity and things of this nature. And it took on a negative spin. And you have it what it is today. But there was that sense of belonging, family, you know, a good social bond with each other and things of that nature. It was just that we didn't have the proper older male guidance, insight, and wisdom to direct us from the negative and into the positive. And unfortunately, as a result of not having those positive male role models prominently positioned in our communities and in our families, many of us who, you know, participated in gangs growing up and continue to in our adult lives are either dead, in prison, or living, you know, destructive lives. Very few have come out of that and have gone on to live prosperous, you know, positive lives and things of that nature. But it is an offshoot of the gangs are offshoot of what's lacking in the family structure.
Absolutely.
You know,
calls other than properly placed. Attorney calls may be monitored and recorded.
So, you know, it turned into something totally different.
Right. So you alluded that you are not necessarily responsible for the crime that you are convicted of. So does that mean that you are an accomplice, or do you mind sharing some information about the actual crime?
Okay. As I mentioned before, the young man who was murdered, Mr. Christopher Salas, who was unfortunately murdered, he was another African American male. I participated in injuring him. I injured him myself, but I didn't kill him. The person that killed him was never arrested. He was questioned. He lied to authorities and things of that nature. The witnesses said he participated in it. He was never arrested, and I never told on him. So this is what prompted them to punish me even more harshly, because I wouldn't tell on him. But my position was I didn't need to tell on him because we had witnesses who identified him as a shooter, and his statements that he gave was contradictory and flat out lies, and the detectives knew this. He was identified by the second victim, Mr. Evans, and yet the police, he wasn't identified by Mr. Evans, but he was told that it was two people who did the shooting, and yet the authorities, the former detective and former sheriff, David Clark, refused to arrest him. The former district attorney in Milwaukee, Michael McCann, refused to issue a criminal complaint against him. And so I was subsequently tried and found guilty of a crime that no one said. The witnesses, it was three witnesses. Neither of them said I committed the murder. And so I was tried and convicted for a murder I didn't commit. Now, again, I must reiterate, I'm not saying that I was totally innocent of committing any crimes. I did commit some crimes that night. It's just simply that I did not commit the murder of this young man. And so I've served nearly 29 years of a life sentence with my first parole eligibility date in 9 more years, while the person who they factually know, who killed this young man he was never arrested, never charged. And they refuse to, even as I still present the facts of the case, the written, documented facts, they still refuse to arrest him and at minimum allow me to have time served and be released.
Why do you think that is?
Part of it is, there's a political agenda in the criminal justice system that has been standing for some years, where they want to have convictions resolved, meaning that once we've been convicted and we've appealed our case once or twice, that's it. They don't want our cases lingering in the courts for years and years and years and years, or they don't want to appear to be soft on crime by giving us due justice, primarily African Americans. Wisconsin is one of the top racist states in the country. Milwaukee is the most segregated city in Wisconsin. We have more black males incarcerated out of the 53216 zip code than any other zip code in the United States. And Wisconsin is one of the last few states who are continuing to promote mass incarceration of African American males, in particular, but African Americans in general. And during my era when I was arrested, the former governor and former district attorney had an agenda for mass incarceration, which the former governor, Tommy Thompson, recently acknowledged, that
Right.
what he did at that time frame was detrimental to African Americans in the state of Wisconsin.
1 minute remaining.
And Milwaukee in particular.
Right. Yeah, I think that's something that a lot of states are beginning to acknowledge, and I did a lot of work around that in Chicago. But yeah, we have 1 minute remaining, so let's stop here, and then if you can just call right back, and we'll continue.
I'll do that. I'll call right back.
All right. Thank you.
All right.
Whew. So obviously our first 15-minute segment is over. I can't believe how fast that went by. Yeah, political agenda. That sounds familiar. It's sad when politics get involved with justice, criminal justice system. All right, here we go.
You have a prepaid call from
Toussaint, Malik.
an inmate. All calls other than properly placed attorney calls may be monitored and recorded. Thank you for using IC Solutions. You may begin speaking now.
Hello.
Welcome back. All right, so I can't believe how fast the first 15 minutes went by, so I'm just going to jump around to the next topic. So now you are convicted and sent off to prison, and let's talk a little bit about what that experience was like for you.
Well, in one aspect, it was going from one chaotic environment, meaning the streets and all the craziness that comes with the street life, into another chaotic environment, prison. And so, in entering prison, first by way of the county jail, the old county jail in Milwaukee, you had to develop a certain mentality right away, meaning that there's a part of your humanity that you have to tuck away and preserve as a means of preserving your sanity. And then there's a part of you that has to become animalistic in order to survive in a very unnatural, inhumane environment. So, coming in, you're taught to be, ready for any and everything at any moment, whether it's violence, riots, whatever the case may be. And it's a completely unnatural, unpredictable environment. You are forced to have to live in a, you're expected to be animalistic, but yet when you act animalistic, you're punished for it and told, well, you need to act like a human. But when you act like a human, you're labeled as being manipulative and a con artist and so forth and so on. So if you don't know how to take care of yourself mentally, emotionally, and spiritually, their intent by design is to damage you and harm you. And so it takes a lot of self-motivation to understand that though I live here, I'm not really of this environment. And so, it was as unnatural as it was. Once you get into your flow and into a routine, then it becomes a bit more easier to maintain yourself and then begin the process of evolving into a better person, if that's your intent. Now, there are a lot of guys in here as well who, they are in here and they, are slowly deteriorating and things of that nature. Many leave here worse off than when they came,
right.
Which is why Wisconsin has one of the highest recidivism rates in the country. And so it was early on in my sentence that I made my mind up. Well, let me back up. Initially, because I had so much time, it was my intent to come into prison, cause chaos, and force the guards to kill me, because my frame of mind was I was not going to serve a life sentence.
Right.
However, early on, I experienced an incident. I was in segregation. The warden at Columbia Correctional Institution, the former warden, was stabbed by a prisoner. They locked a lot of us up and said because of our names being popular, even though we didn't have anything to do with the incident. I was in segregation. I heard an older brother, Muslim brother, talking to a young man, and he asked the young man, "Who are you?" And that question struck me deeply. And it was as though he was posing a question to me, and I couldn't answer it. I couldn't answer who I was. And that caused me to literally shed tears. And so I made up my mind right then and there, no matter what, if I die in prison or if I die in the streets, I want to be able to, first and foremost, know who I am, and second of all, leave a legacy, a history for my kids and my family and things of this nature that is something other than the street life. And so I decided to begin studying history, politics, religion, just a plethora of things that will be able to enrich my consciousness. And I made up my mind as well that once I left segregation, because of the mentality of the Muslim brother, that I would become a Muslim. So they transferred me to Waupun Correctional Institution. I got there, went to the Jumu'ah services for the Muslims and asked them, how did I become a Muslim? I became a Muslim, and I've been Muslim ever since. And throughout this time frame of being Muslim, I've noticed that there's a stigma, positive and negative, related to being a Muslim in prison. In the early stages of my incarceration, the Muslims were very well respected, a very powerful group in a positive way, but also hated and despised by prisoners and staff alike. As time went on, that reputation began to slowly deteriorate to where it's not the same anymore. And so things have shifted. Early on in my sentence, there was more of a collectiveness to grow in a positive manner. There was more of a desire to be involved and linked with the outside world so that we can inform the outside world of what's going on and try to prevent young people from coming to prison. And so as time went on, that effort has begun to deteriorate. Whereas, everything that we do as prisoners, we're deemed to be have an ulterior motive.
Right.
so that the religious services are not respected anymore. There are no more social programs, genuine social programs that promote us bettering ourselves in a truly authentic manner anymore. Now it's about PR and things of this nature. It has become more violent in the prisons, more stabbings, more gang attacks, and more prisoners dying by way of suicide and health issues and neglect and so forth and so on in the prisons. So at this stage in my sentence, it is more so about survival of the fittest than it has ever been.
Wow.
In this prison alone, you have multiple stabbings that have occurred within the last year or 2 years, and nothing has changed. And this is supposed to be the most securest environment in the Department of Corrections. And so throughout all of these years, I made it my personal obligation to not only protect myself physically, but to protect myself mentally, emotionally, spiritually, so that once I do, if I do, return back to society, I won't return damaged to the degree where I'm no longer of benefit to people. I will return an asset versus a threat.
Wow. Yeah. I did read about the stabbings that went on in there. I think it was a month ago or so. So yeah.
Yes.
And so let me ask you about, it kind of goes hand in hand. So it sounds like religion and having that group of like-minded individuals to kind of keep you uplifted and to give you hope is what kept you sane really throughout all this time. So that begs me to ask the question about mental health in prison and what kind of services you have available and if you've utilized any of them. As you know, I did work for the DOC for some time, and my experience, well, it's my experience, so I want to hear yours from your perspective.
Okay. Early on, I didn't.
No calls other than properly placed attorney calls may be monitored and recorded.
Early on in my incarceration, I really didn't participate in mental health services. Even though I needed to, I didn't. Early on, being a Muslim and being around older men who had far more prison experience and life experiences than me was absolutely monumental in me remaining alive and sane. And once I began to mature and grow older and study psychology and so forth and so on, it kind of opened me up to being willing to expose myself emotionally and mentally to clinical services. So it wasn't until years down the line that I actually began to actively participate in psychological services. But up until then, it was key things about my religion, Islam, that helped me in ways that are indescribable. We have a context in Islam that says the greatest struggle is against yourself, your inner self. Mm-hmm. And when I read that early on, I knew Islam was for me, even though I've studied other religions. That short sentence changed me forever because I felt as though there were no other religion that could address what I knew to be my inner turmoil. And so once I began to study this concept and understand it and have it explained to me and watch other brothers live it, it drew me in even more. It caused me to focus on my inner self even more and have things understood. So as time went on and I began to participate in clinical services, there was a wall I had to tear down first. And once I was able to do that and allow them into me and allow myself to be authentic with myself and them, I began to discover things about myself that I had either deeply repressed, had forgotten, or simply didn't know. And participating in that was one of the greatest blessings in my life. Now, I have to say that the clinicians that I was dealing with, I felt them to be authentic, genuine, and sincere.
Mm-hmm.
As a whole, clinical services in the Wisconsin Department of Corrections, to be blunt with you, they're garbage. Because it's a mentality with the higher up staff that if clinical services is not against us, then they don't last.
Right.
And so it's rare that we have genuine assistance,
right,
psychological assistance coming from clinicians.
right.
And so their dealings with us is a few minutes at a time, and
Mm-hmm.
they, get our story, and then they on to the next person.
Right.
And that is not sufficient when you have men who have suffered from undiagnosed, misdiagnosed, mistreated, misprescribed mental illness for a number of years, and come here only to be seen and evaluated for a few moments at a time, and prescribed some type of psychotropic drug as a pacifier.
Mm-hmm.
And so when we have mental health episodes, we're punished.
Right.
Wisconsin don't have the facility for mentally ill patients, so they send them to prison.
Yeah.
And they discard the street drugs and give them pharmaceutical drugs. So they give them Band-Aids for their deep wounds. And so when that Band-Aid is not sufficient, when the pharmaceuticals are not sufficient, they put us in a hole, and they bury us in a hole, and they do all type of, inhumane things to us in them segregation buildings. And then they say, well, you violated the rules, so this is the consequence. And so many leave here because we can't get the help that we desperately need. Angry, bitter, resentful. And so we go out to society and we take it out on society.
Yeah.
And so society, go ahead.
Oh, I was going to say that's exactly
1 minute remaining.
That's exactly part of the reason why I left. That's actually a huge reason, because I didn't see a lot of treatment going on. I didn't see a lot of, authenticity happening. Everyone was a manipulator, liar. And basically, I felt it was more focused on behavior control rather than really healing and doing therapy. But we got our 1 minute warning again, so we'll just hang up and I'll wait for you to call back.
Okay.
Thank you, Malik.
All right.
Whew. This is intense. I feel like I'm looking at these questions and he's pretty much hitting a lot of them. He's answering a lot of them, so I don't have to pose it again. Yeah, he's very insightful.
You have a prepaid call from
Toussaint, Malik.
an inmate. All calls other than properly placed attorney calls may be monitored and recorded. Thank you for using IC Solutions. You may begin speaking now.
Hello?
Welcome back.
Okay, thank you.
So thank you for sharing that with us. And I have a question about, so WSPF is a supermax, and even though it's not legally labeled as supermax because they're no longer legal, we all know that it's a supermax. So I'm wondering, you've been in for 29 years. I'm wondering why your level is still at a maximum security.
In one respect, I was down at a medium security prison several years ago, in 2005 or 6. that was after coming out of state. They sent us out of state to different prisons out of state. I was in Tennessee and I was in Minnesota. And when I was brought back to Wisconsin, I was sent to a medium security institution where it was Stanley Correctional Institution, one of the most racist institutions in the state of Wisconsin. It was there that a prisoner put forth bogus sexual assault allegations against myself and another prisoner. And as a result of that, they sent me to back to maximum security. And for the record, I must say the allegations were false. Staff knew that these were false allegations. This was a young man who was trying to manipulate himself out of whatever situations he was involved in with other prisoners that didn't have anything to do with me. So those allegations were 100% false. I never had any type of sexual contact with this young man. But as a result of that, I've maintained maximum security prison classification, which, by the way, I'm perfectly fine with. My intent is I'm not concerned about transitioning in that manner from max to medium, so forth and so on, because my focus is home. You know, I want to leave from this prison going back home. I don't, you know, because they use security classifications as a manipulation tool in this system. But in all actuality, you're not allowed to benefit from being classified a lesser security level. And what I mean by that is years and years ago, they used to have programs in the prisons where in a maximum security prison, they tell you if you complete this program, we'll send you to medium to do a program. You complete the program and they send you within 30 days. You get there, they say if you complete this program, we'll send you to a minimum. You complete the program in 30 days, they send you to the minimum. So they would give you these programs, you complete them, and they transition you out of the system or to lower classifications. They no longer do that in the sense of you complete the program, they come up with a test for you to take, and now you got to take another program. You complete the program, now you got to wait 18 months, 2 years to be sent out to a lower classification prison. And it just goes on and on and on. And they make excuses as to why you can't be released after you completed the program, or why you can't leave after you completed the program. And part of it is their fault, part of it is not, because there's a major problem with overcrowding in the prison system in Wisconsin. There are over 23,000 prisoners locked up in Wisconsin. 5,000 of those prisoners, over 5,000, are prisoners who were violated parole rules. They didn't commit crimes, they just violated parole rules. Over 5,000 people. You have over 2,000 who are all now prisoners who've been eligible for parole and have been denied for no other reason than the old memo that former Governor Tommy Thompson put out, where he gave the DOC a directive to do all that they can to prevent the release of violent prisoners. And so it has already been made known that phrase, violent prisoners or violent crimes, relates specifically to one group of people, African Americans. So as a result of this, you have a prison system that is swelled beyond capacity, understaffed. The quality of staff has decreased over the years, and the type of treatment that we receive has decreased over the years. The prisoners who know how to function in this environment and allow the environment to be much better than what it is, they look at us as gang members. They look at us as negative leaders, influencers, because they say if we can influence, we have control. And if we can control, this means we can dictate prisoners to do something negative. So they don't allow us to be leaders in our religious communities. They don't allow us to be leaders in social groups inside of the prisons. But they have a generic program called the mentor program in the prisons. But they won't allow the mentors to be mentors.
Right.
because they say that that's allowing the prisoner to have too much power. But yet, the system is completely out of control. And so those who know what to do, we're not saying, let us run the prisons. We're saying, let's work together so that we can make the prison safer for not only staff, but we live here. I live here 24/7. They come through their time and they leave.
Right.
I want to stay for myself, whether I'm in max, medium, minimum, wherever. I'm a human being. I want to live in a safe environment. And so, their safety comes first, not ours. When guards are attacked, it's a problem. When we are attacked, they laugh about it and things of this nature. There were 3 stabbings in segregation, in this segregation a year ago, within a month, within a 30-day period, and no procedures changed. No staff members were fired. But when an officer is stabbed, they lock the prison down and they do a massive search and things of this nature. Rules change.
Calls other than properly placed. Attorney calls may be monitored and recorded.
They take things from us, and now it is about them. We need to make changes. Our safety, our safety, our safety. Well, what about our safety?
And I do want to just jump in and share that, like you were saying, that you were falsely accused of some assault or something like that, and that's what got you back to maximum. I do want to share that in my experience, I've seen that law, which is called the Prison Rape Elimination Act, or PREA. I've seen it being used and misused and abused by certain inmates who, just for the simple fact of, when you make such a claim, it has to be taken seriously because it's a federal law and it has to be investigated. And so a lot of them have caught on that, making such allegations will get them moved to a different pod, or moved to a different part of the prison, or moved to a completely different prison, period. So I've seen a lot of people use that in a way to benefit themselves. So I think the statistics are that over 90% of the PREA claims are found to be unsubstantiated and false.
Yes. And so as a result of that, just like you just mentioned, but you also have staff who use that same organization to manipulate prisoners. And you have staff who will suggest or flat out prisoners to use that organization against prisoners. You know what I mean? And so this is a dangerous stuff. Don't get me wrong. I believe, as I said before, in our safety. We should be safe.
Mm-hmm.
But I know from experience how staff are very manipulative. Of course, you got the prisoners who are manipulative, but some of the biggest criminals inside of these prisons are not the prisoners. They are the controllers of our environment. And so they are criminals. They just haven't been caught yet.
Right.
A lot of the things that go on in these prisons go on with the approval of staff. You have untold amounts of contraband being brought into the prisons, yet we're punished when it's caught up. You have untold number of sexual assaults that have been reported at the prompting of staff, and yet nothing is done when it's unsubstantiated.
Yeah.
And so if you are a certain caliber of a prisoner, they use propaganda to assassinate your character, thinking that now you have no more validity with your peers. And so they use a variety of tactics, whether it's psychological, social, economical, and so forth and so on, to further oppress, suppress, and things of this nature, and make it seem as though we're just so bad. We're just so bad. When in all actuality, in most instances, all we need is a little help. Yeah. And that's it.
Malik, we have about 4 minutes left. So I know you said you get 3 calls and this is our 3rd call. So for the last couple of minutes, first I want to say thank you for your honesty and for your authenticity and for sharing your story with us. But if we could just in the last couple of minutes, just go over some, I guess, more lighthearted questions.
Okay.
So number one, as I've told you, I run this group online and we discuss true crime cases. And one of the cases that we're analyzing right now is the Christopher Watts case. And so a lot of our members had questions about your thoughts about this case.
I can only go into it to a certain degree,
yeah,
because I only know about news reports and things of this nature. So first and foremost, you gotta. I think society is kind of not conscious of the fact that you have a lot of people in society who suffer immensely from their own inner demons, and oftentimes they don't know how to address, initially acknowledge and then begin to address those inner demons. And so they manifest oftentimes in some of the most brutal, violent manners, not against people we don't know, but against people we know, our spouses, our children, siblings, and so forth and so on. And so rather than separate ourselves from someone that we once loved to be with someone else, foolishly, we believe that the only way to dissolve this relationship is by way of one of the most, ultimate acts, which is murder. And so oftentimes murder is not, just a savage act. It is the prompting of, or the manifestation of, some type of severe inner conflict.
Right.
And the manner in which it's put into the public is, we're just animals. We're savages. There's no reason that this person should have done this or done that. When in all actuality, every action has a root.
That's what we're trying to get at.
Right. Oftentimes we only look at the action. We are unwilling to go inside and get to the root of it because that entails too much work. It entails too much effort. And then ultimately it may entail that the act, really as brutal as it was not as brutal as the root cause that, the source of what made that person commit the act. Yeah. And so people will look at it as, well, he beat the case because he's mentally ill.
1 minute remaining.
And it's not just about beating a case, it's about preventing the act from occurring again and spreading. Right. So that's our time. I want to thank you very much for this opportunity to, be vocal with the public and things of this nature. I hope in some or another, the listeners are able to benefit from, something that I've conveyed. I understand that there will be negative feedback. I accept that. That's just a natural part of life.
Well, actually, Malik, I'm reading the chat as we're talking, and I have not seen any negative comments. Actually, our listeners are thanking you for your time. They're thanking you for your insight. They're saying you were great. We even have listeners in Australia. They're saying hello, and they're thanking you.
Well,
so
before we hang up, it's gonna cut off on us. You can give them my information and let them know they can contact me anyway about me.
Oh, it hung up. So yeah, that was, wow. Yes, I'm definitely going to invite him again. I feel like we didn't even get through half of what we wanted to get through. I don't know why I even thought in the first place that 45 minutes would be enough. But yeah, that was awesome. Yes, I could get him on again. We would just have to coordinate our times, and I have to ask him when the next time he will have access to the phone is, and then we can set something up. Yeah, but he's very insightful, and you're right in that he's learned a lot while he's in there. And I found it really impactful when he said that his once he was incarcerated, he had to tuck away part of his humanity. I think that struck me a lot. I feel that a lot of times, um, even in my experience, there's a certain aspect of having to dehumanize prisoners in order to get through my job there on a daily basis, because there are many guys in there who have ulterior motives, who are negative, and then there are guys who aren't. And in order to save myself the energy from trying to decipher who's who, I think a lot of times people get, jaded in that way, in that everybody just, it's easier to just put everyone in one category. So, Emma, yes, I am able to put his contact info out there, so I will do that. Let me just get that really quick. And I think he has or at some point they have this blog for inmates that can post things. And I think he at some point started, but eventually stopped. I'm not sure. See, we have so many questions, and there's just not enough time. So we'll definitely have to do it again. 1 second. I'm just looking for the information. Jennifer Madison is asking. Well, actually, I can put it up on the screen so we can all see it. Is there solid data regarding who is more likely to reoffend? I would think there would be a way to assess people who are more likely to change as opposed to who are not. Yes, there definitely is a lot of research in terms of who's more likely to reoffend, and they do use something. They do use a measure to assess the level of risk of each individual inmate. It's in Wisconsin. It's called Compass, which is basically it's an interview process, and it goes over your history, your criminal history, your personality, and different factors that will determine the likelihood of you engaging in other crimes. And so while that sounds great in theory, I think that a lot of times, people rely too much on these algorithms, and so it immediately sets you up from the beginning that once you do go into prison, the idea is to become rehabilitated, that those high risks that you scored initially on your compass, that those are the areas that we're supposed to target while they're incarcerated and lower that risk. However, that that doesn't really happen in that way, and so a lot of times those compass scores, become, they're given so much weight that inmates get harsher sentences. If they are released on extended supervision, like Malik was saying, over 5,000 people in Wisconsin are incarcerated based on, not because they committed another crime, but because they violated a rule of their parole. So whether that's, I don't know, drinking or, driving without a license, something minor, I guess those are crimes, but it's something non-criminal that you would do to violate your parole, they get sent back to prison, no questions asked. So I don't know, it's not balanced. It's not a black and white thing. There's definitely a lot of gray area, and I find that assessing for that in the research is difficult as well. I hope that answers some of it. All right, so let me just, you know what? I will put his information up in the group. How about that? Because that way it's not just out here, but I will put it up in the group. And if anyone would like to reach out, they can do that. Wow, okay, my mind is still kind of racing. I'm still trying to process and digest everything that we just talked about. So we will, I will reach out to him again and see if he would be interested in another interview. And yeah, this went by really fast. So thank you all for tuning in, and thank you for listening, and thank you for being civil and nice. I think this means a lot, not only to him, but to me as well, to be able to hear his side of the story. I can't imagine 30 years, 29 years in prison. My God. Wow. So once again, thank you. And thank you so much to Emma for helping me out this morning. I really appreciate it. Thank you so much. And I'll see you guys later.